But here it is. It's the Sunday after Christmas. And I'm sure some of us still have Christmas gatherings this coming week. I think we might get together later this week with my side of the family. But it's just hard to believe that Christmas is already here and gone. And it should be every day. I'd get tired of... Oh, yes, I know what you mean, Lynn. I was going to say, there's a Donald Duck movie about that, I think. I already told you Abby's home with Eva. I didn't want you to think that she got mad about her gifts and decided not to be with me, because that's not the case. She said she was pretty happy with her gifts, so that was good. She's at home taking care of little Eva, though, and Lyndon was staying with her. So I brought Archer with me. He likes to be my shadow and hang out, so I only have him here with me today. Anyhow, on the Sunday after Christmas, I like to look at something that happened after Christmas. And Heather, since you already joked to me about it, do you remember what that might be?
We talked about the wise men.
Okay. Yep, Matthew chapter 2. She said, I look back at my notes to see what last year was, because oftentimes around Christmas I do similar things. I change it up a little bit, add some more things in as I find more information, maybe take out other things. And she's right. I want to look at Matthew chapter 2 again. Matthew chapter 2, as you will recognize if you open there in your Bible, is where we read about some other characters that showed up at Jesus' birth, okay? We'll read through not chapter 12. That'd be a long time. Verse 12. It's 1 through 12. And I just kind of want to take it apart a little bit and just show us a little bit about what was going on after the birth of Jesus, after Christmas, if I can say that, okay? And how that applies to us even today, okay? Matthew 2, verse 1, it says, After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, and they asked, Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Now, the first thing I want us to get from this is that first word that I read from that passage, and that's after, okay? Despite what we oftentimes see in the nativity scenes, the wise men, as we call them, weren't there at the stable seeing Jesus in the manger, okay? They weren't there. We see it in all the pictures and the figurines, but they weren't there. That word after truly means after. It's estimated to be anywhere from 6 to 20 months after his birth that these guys show up. Looking at some non-biblical accounts of the time, some experts have deduced it was probably around a year after his birth, okay? And this was because, all right, they weren't informed by angels, but if you remember from the story and as we'll read, they were informed in a much different way, a way that maybe took them a little more time, as we're going to see. So they eventually came to his place of birth in Bethlehem. For one reason or another, Mary and Joseph were still there. Now, my kids were all born in DuBois. We didn't stay there for a year. We were only there a couple days, and we came home. Obviously, for Mary and Joseph, travel was much more difficult on donkey, so the distance of about 90 miles that they had to go home was much more than if we were traveling 90 miles today, we wouldn't even think about it. So, for reasons unknown to us, they stayed in Bethlehem for most likely a year or more. Maybe Joseph had family there. Maybe he was able to get some work. I don't know what the situation was. They were still in Bethlehem at the time, though. Now, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, because Bethlehem was a desired town. The other name for Bethlehem, as we're going to read, the city of David, right? It's the city where David had been born and raised, and it had that name, City of David. It's where Jacob and Rachel were buried. They were still in Bethlehem, still are to this day. I do believe you can go and see the site of their burial. What else happened in Bethlehem? Ruth met Boaz. Do you remember that story? She came back with her mother-in-law. They end up meeting Boaz. He's the kinsman redeemer. They get married. That all happened in Bethlehem. So it's kind of a city of history, much like, where are you, Jim? Philadelphia, right? You go to Philly, and you know everything that goes with it. I was just telling Archer the other day about the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. There's history there, right? Much different than the history of, say, West Freedom or Clarion or something. It's completely different. Now, Bethlehem sits 6 miles outside of the capital city of Jerusalem. And who was living there at the time? King Herod, right? And he was considered the king of the Jews, all right? That's what he called himself. He was a rough character. We know that. He killed numerous people. We don't know how many, like in war, in his advances of the kingdom. Don't know how many. He would also just kill people just through the everyday duties and responsibilities of being king. He would kill people. They believe he murdered his brother-in-law. Not 100% sure. But they do know he murdered his wife and 3 of his sons. So, not really a great guy, okay? Pretty terrible. If you ever feel disappointed as a parent, just look at Herod, because you're doing better than that guy, all right? Not a great dude. He was the king of the Jews of the area, and so it makes sense that the wise men, as we call them, go to Jerusalem and speak with him to find out where this new king was born, all right? And there's a couple things we're going to have to ask about these fellows, these wise men, or magi as they're called. Who are they? And why did they go to Jerusalem? Now, we also don't know this about them, how many there actually was, okay? We typically assume that there was, how many? 3, yeah, 3, because of the gifts, right? But there's no way to know for sure how many wise men or people in their entourage there were in total, okay? We frequently see them as kings, right? And we have the old carol that we sang. Did we sing that a couple of weeks ago? Yeah. We Three Kings? Yeah, We Three Kings of Orient, or the song. We sing that one, but we don't actually know that they were kings, all right? They're referred to as magi. If you don't have your Bible open, I'm just going to spell that real quick for you. M-A-G-I, okay? That's the most accurate term used to describe them. And magi, as I'll show you, is very similar to another word that we use even today, magic, right? M-A-G-I-C, okay? They get their name magi from that word magic, okay? And that's the best word to describe them, rather than say like wise men or king, because they had an interest in astrology, okay? Now, if you're thinking astrology is going out and looking up at the stars like I would think, then you're kind of right. But if you're going out looking at the stars with a telescope and looking at the different constellations and things like that, identifying things in the night sky, that's more astronomy, okay? Same beginning, astro, stars, Astronomy, okay, is the scientific study of it. Astrology is more like a spiritual, religious side of looking at the stars. It's where today we kind of get those, not the fortune cookie. What are those things that you get them at the what is it? Horoscopes. Yeah, who said that? Somebody's good. Was that you, Judy? Oh, Jen. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I knew he meant the horoscope things. That's astrology. Okay, so studying the stars, but not necessarily for a scientific purpose, but more of like a superstitious one. Okay, and we know this to be pretty accurate because there was regions to the east of Jerusalem in Persia that were known for their practice of astrology, okay? In addition to that, they practiced dream interpretation and magic, okay? Hence that term, magi. Now, this wasn't like magic like you have at a kid's birthday party, you know, a guy pulls a rabbit out of the hat. I don't even know if they do that anymore. I couldn't tell you the last time I saw a magic show. That's not the kind of magic, though, that we're talking about here. We're talking about magic like witchcraft type magic, okay? Sorcery, black magic type stuff, okay? Once again, it's kind of that superstitious, spiritual, religious realm of stuff, okay? That's what these guys were into, all right? They, in their practice of this religion, for lack of a better word, all right, they studied the stars, and they would prophesy off of these stars, okay? Now, their predictions were so, I don't want to say accurate, but they were so trusted that if they saw in the stars that a king was going to die, kings would go around killing each other so that they weren't the one to fulfill the prophecy. You see what I'm saying? That's how much trust and faith that region put in the hands of these guys, and they're looking at the stars. Once again, thing to remember, not a scientific study of it. It's more of a spiritual, superstitious study of the stars, but it held a lot of weight for the people in the region. We don't know what specific anomaly occurred that told them a new king was born. All right, I don't know if they saw a new star and that meant there's a new king. I don't know if a star went out and they said there's going to be a new king. I don't know if they lied. I have no idea what it was, but something happened in the sky, and their thought that came to mind through their practice of this foreign and odd religion was that a new king is born. So they went on a journey. And this wasn't like, this wasn't a little trip. Like the other day, I needed to run up to Clarion, wasn't sure if the place was going to be open or not, but it's a 20-minute drive, needed to do some other stuff there anyhow. We drove up, place wasn't open, not a big deal, did the other stuff we needed to do, came home, okay? 20 minutes, not a big deal. If you're wrong and they weren't there and they were closed like they were for me, you didn't waste any time. That's not the case with this. These guys traveled, it's estimated, over 800 miles. Can you imagine that? Now, have any of you ever traveled 800 miles because you thought you saw something in the sky? No. Could you imagine that, Sam? You're driving your truck, right? You plan out ahead your trip. You don't just tell Joyce when you're back in time driving, hey, I'm heading out on a trip. I don't know where I'm going. I'm going 800 miles, and I'm just heading out. You'd never do that, right? These guys just on, I don't know if it's instinct or intuition, false intuition maybe. It was based off false practices. They go on a trip of 800 miles. And I don't even think they knew how long that trip was going to be. Maybe at first they thought it was only going to be a 5-minute drive or 5-minute ride. and they take off and it turns into much longer? I don't know. But a trip of that magnitude would have taken many, many, many resources, okay? I haven't looked into this, but I don't think camels are great on gas mileage, okay? I think there would have been multiple stops for fuel and, bathroom breaks and things like that. In addition to just the financial resources for the trip, because it costs them money to go on a trip, just like it costs us money to go on a trip today, there was the gifts that they had, all right? So security would have been considered. Anytime I think of it, you see a Brinks truck, an armored vehicle delivering money. The guys aren't just there in plain clothes. They have all their guns and their bulletproof vest security, right? So we picture, these guys just riding by themselves on camels out across the desert, but in reality, there was probably much more to their entourage, which I tell you all that to say this. It was even more of an undertaking than what our typical pictures and displays portray to us. It wasn't just 3 guys going out on their own. There was a lot associated with it. Imagine if you were in their shoes telling your wife you're going on a trip, you don't know how long you're going to be gone, you don't know where you're going, it's you and 2 of your buddies and then everybody else that has to go with you. That probably wouldn't go over too well. Yet that's the kind of trip these guys went on. They had no idea where they were going, how long they'd be out, or how far. And yet they went. To answer this question of why they went to Jerusalem, was pretty simple. Jerusalem was the capital, the royal city. They thought a king would be in the royal city, right? So they go to that Jewish capital because they thought Herod, being the king of the Jews, would be the one to know where this newborn king of the Jews would be found. And they're straight up with him. They just tell him the truth. They said, we want to worship him, which literally means for them, we want to bow down in prostrate form before him, okay? Now, that made Herod pretty mad. In verse 3, it says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Well, why would that disturb the rest of Jerusalem? Were they mad that a new king was born? Not really. They would have been happy to have a new king. They didn't like Herod. But they knew that when Herod would hear the news, it would lead to trouble because he was a loose cannon. And there would be retaliation, brutal retaliation. Once again, killing and massacre was not an abnormal activity for Herod. Near his death, just for example, he had many Jewish leaders held in a room ready to be executed so that people would cry on the day he died. Not because he died, but they'd be crying because others died. But he wanted the nation to be in mourning when he died. That's a sick plan. That's a sick plan. And thankfully, that plan was eventually foiled. But that's the kind of guy this was. He called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, and he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. Now, the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, who would these have been? These are the Sadducees, the Pharisees. Yep, the members of the Sanhedrin. And just in case you don't remember this, they didn't get along. They studied the same scriptures. They were worshiping the same God, but they didn't get along. Kind of like different denominations today sometimes don't get along. So most likely they were asked in private, and then their responses happened to be the same. And they told Herod or his representatives, they said, in Bethlehem, in Judea, for the prophet has written, but you, Bethlehem, and the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. Now, once again, Bethlehem was a place of great history. It was a well-known place, but it was a small town. It never really amounted to much size. And because of that, it kind of got lost in the shadows to places like Jerusalem, okay? So it was thought that nothing good would be happening in Bethlehem. And it was much of a surprise to them when they heard that, no, the king isn't coming to Jerusalem. He's coming in Bethlehem. Now Herod called the Magi secretly, and he found out from them the exact time that star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for this child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." Well, why did he want to know the exact time? We read later in the Bible because he was brewing up another plan of retaliation, right, that he went through with when he murdered the children of Bethlehem trying to find baby Jesus. And what this points to is really what was not prophesied, but what was explained about in the book of Revelation, chapter 11, 12, one of those, where it explains just that fight between good and evil that occurred when Jesus was born. We picture the scene of Jesus to be calm and peaceful. We sing about that in the songs. But in all reality, there was a spiritual war occurring. Herod wanted that baby Jesus killed. I don't know that he himself knew it from a spiritual perspective that he was indeed the Messiah. He was more looking at it from a personal perspective of, hey, this guy might overthrow my throne. But this proves the point that there was much tension, and there was that fight between not just good and evil, but God, goodness, and sin, even in the birth of that little baby Jesus. After they heard from the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Now this sentence kind of alludes to us that star was moving, showing them where exactly they needed to go. If I saw a moving star that was showing me where I needed to go, maybe I'd be more apt to take a journey of 800 miles. But until I see one, I'm probably not going to do that on the spur of a moment. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I think it'd be kind of funny to see them hand those gifts to a baby. Here's a bottle of perfume. What's a baby going to do with that? Carolyn Auten, she's back there. We were just talking about this last week, the week before, right? She asked me about these gifts, and she said, isn't there more to these gifts? It wasn't just, handing the baby these things. And I said, yeah, that's right, because gold, we know gold's valuable. It was valuable then. It's valuable today. It made sense to give that as a gift. Parents would take that gold. They might sell it so that they could, buy essentials for the baby. It's kind of like a gift card, all right? Maybe that guy didn't think ahead, and he stopped at Sheetz on the way. He's like, I'll get the gold. Then they can use it, however they want. I don't know. But gold was essentially giving a gift card, currency. You could use it to purchase whatever it was that you needed, okay? Frankincense was and still is very costly perfume. It also has some health benefits. For a couple years, Abby and I have used it on our faces. That's why my face just glows, Dan, in case you're wondering. All right, I don't use it on a daily basis, but I'll mix it in with some oil and put it into my facial hair, my beard, and it helps to soften it, and it helps so you don't get infection and things like that. It lasts you a long time, okay, because you only use at one time a drop, okay? Last I checked, and I'm almost sick to say this because I saw that we're out, a 1 ounce bottle, which is like that big, $90. Yeah, that stuff ain't cheap. It's pretty expensive. It works though, and it smells really nice. And it lasts you a long time. But it's an expensive perfume. You think 1 pound of that stuff would be well over $1,000, be about $1,500 for a pound of frankincense. That's expensive. That's what they brought to Jesus. I don't know how much. If they brought an ounce to him, that would have been a lot. If they brought, a full pound, 16 ounces, that would have been a whole lot. Did they bring more? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Very expensive gift. Once again, they may have used it for its purpose. They may have used it on his skin or used it as a perfume. They may have sold it. We don't know. The last gift, the myrrh, was once again a pricey gift. It was a hefty gift. I mean, gold has weight to it too, but myrrh was hefty because of how much it required, all right? And myrrh, if you don't know, I've explained this before, I know I have. Myrrh was a traditional embalming product, okay? So myrrh was some parts of a plant, and they'd mix it with other plants, and it was kind of like when it was done, it kind of looked like a salad. They'd have all these different, leaves and things all mixed in, okay? It wasn't perfume like frankincense. It would have been like in a bag, kind of more like a potpourri, okay, if you can imagine that. It would have, had different plant parts in there, and it would have come probably like in a bag or a sack of some sort. And it was used in, we call it the embalming process. It didn't really embalm anybody's body, but what would happen is they would place that myrrh on the body of the deceased after they had laid it in a tomb. They put them in the tomb, they would put the myrrh on top, and that would help to make them presentable for a longer period of time so that, folks could come and pay their respects. I read somewhere, and I don't know where, but a typical burial could use well over 50 pounds, if not northwards of 100 pounds of myrrh. That's a lot. That's a lot. And it's possible that they used even more, because I read somewhere else that they may have switched them out or just continued to add more to it. So this was, like I said, a hefty gift. Not exactly a blanket, is it? Now, I think to understand the awkwardness of this, because it was a very awkward gift, I think I could compare it probably best to, like, if somebody, for a newborn baby, if you bought them, not like an insurance policy, because like there's Gerber insurance, that's kind of a normal thing people will get. I don't know if they still do that, but the Gerber insurance, that's a normal thing. But like if you went to a newborn and gave their parents like a gift certificate for a funeral home, that would be weird, okay? We can agree on that. Or like if you came and brought a casket and said, hey, here's a casket in case you need it, that would be weird. They'd probably tell you to get out, okay? Once again, that's the awkwardness of bringing myrrh to a baby shower. You've all been there where you've got or seen somebody get awkward baby shower gifts, right? This was probably the apex of them. Very awkward gift to bring. I've joked and said I'm not a great gift giver. This guy may have been even worse than me. The first guy brings basically a gift card. The next guy brings perfume, which was useful. The last guy brings preparation for a burial. Carolyn, as we were talking, we said that myrrh signified his eventual death, right? See, these guys recognized he was born as a baby, but there's more to this story than just the baby laying in a manger. They identified him as king because of the value of the gifts. They were very expensive. But they identified his eventual death. And thirdly, as I kind of alluded to a little bit, these gifts may have paved the way for their escape to Egypt. All right, when Herod wanted to kill all the babies in Bethlehem, Joseph was approached by an angel in a dream and said, get out of here. Once again, travel cost money. They now had the funds to travel. Remember, dreams was part of the Magi's. I don't want to say profession because it wasn't really a profession, but their practice in studying the astrology and their mysticism. So they were informed in a dream, accurately, not to go back to Herod. They returned to their country by another route. Once again, God uses this practice that they're involved in to keep his son safe. We don't know the route that they went. I wish it would have told us the exact route. I think it would be cool to see that on a map. I don't know. But all we know is that they were approached in a dream and said, don't go back to Herod. You got to go a different way. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the point of all this? Like, it's all well and good to understand this, but what's the point of it? Aside from just reading a little bit more of the Christmas story, I want to point this out to you. This is from Matthew. He himself was Jewish, right? He had been a tax collector. He was a devout Jew. And his writings focus on Jesus as the Messiah for the Jewish people and beyond. But he specifically looks at his messiahship through the eyes of a Jewish person. He looks at what the prophets said. He includes that in his account with the Magi. And he looks at other locations in the Old Testament pointing towards the Messiah, okay? Now, Luke's account, which we read that on Christmas Eve, Luke chapter 2, that's a typical Christmas story. His account doesn't necessarily focus on the Jewish side of things. Includes a little bit of that, but Luke more focuses on the human side of things. He was a physician, so he looked at it from the eyes of a physician, looking at kind of the biology of it and the human side of it. He doesn't say anything about the Magi. He talks about the shepherds, right? And I've mentioned before how those shepherds were the lowest of the low in the human social structure of that time, okay? Now, ask yourself this. Who do the Magi represent? Who do the Magi represent? If the shepherds represent the lowest of the low, we like to think the Magi represent the high, right? You're right, Barb. That's what we always think. But that's not really the case. Sorry, Barb. We think that these guys were kings. That's what we often say in Psalm, but we don't know for sure that they were actually royalty. In our minds, we think they represent that upper echelon of society, but they actually represent something much different. Look at their religious beliefs. They were astrologers, right? Sorcerers, diviners. They were into magic, witchcraft. Their religion was very much one of mysticism and intrigue and just kind of obscurity. There's a book I have. I recommend it. It's really a good one to read before you go to bed at night. It's called Manners and Customs of the Bible. Okay? It's actually not as boring as I just made it sound. It's pretty interesting. Here's what the author says about these magi. He says, Magiism was essentially the worship of the elements, the recognition of fire, air, earth, and water as the only proper objects of human reverence. The Magi held no personal gods, and therefore naturally rejected temples, shrines, and images, as tending to encourage the notion that gods existed of a like nature with man, that is, possessing personality, living and intelligent beings. Theirs was not nature worship, but a nature worship of a very peculiar kind. They did not place gods over different parts of nature like the Greeks. They did not even personify the powers of nature like the Hindus. They paid their devotion to the actual material things themselves. Fire was the most subtle and ethereal principle, and again the most powerful agent, attracted their highest regards. And on their fire altars, they had a sacred flame, generally said to have been kindled from heaven. And that flame was kept burning uninterrupted from year to year and from age to age, by a band of their priests whose special duty it was to see that the sacred spark was never extinguished. Okay? Now, you might still be thinking, why in the world did you read this to me? Because you know what I get from all of this? The Magi had no good reason to be there. Think about it. They didn't worship God or gods or the one true God. They didn't worship anything. They didn't view an individual person as something to be worshiped. They didn't have an upbringing with Jewish education. They had no knowledge of a coming Messiah, nor a need for one, or a desire for one. Most likely, they didn't know any of the Old Testament scriptures, had never heard of them. They didn't have any prophecies foretelling his birth, where to expect him, where to find him. They didn't have anything except their broken religion of looking at stars. And yet they came and worshiped Jesus. That's the whole point of this. Now you might be thinking, but what's that have to do with me today? Well, you tell me what it has to do with you. Who are you? Where are you in this story? One group sets off on a journey of hundreds of miles because they saw a new star. They come bringing gifts for a new king. They have the hassle of planning the journey and everything that goes along with that. They travel on camels, most likely for days, weeks, and months, possibly a year or more, risking robbery, injury, death, carrying valuable gifts for a baby that they have never met and know nothing about. And they come to worship Jesus. Now, who's the other party that we read about? Herod and his advisors. Remember what I told you his advisors were? They were the Sadducees, the Pharisees, right? The members of the Sanhedrin land. They were the experts on the Jewish history and law. They would have had entire books of the Torah, if not the whole thing memorized. Any of you have a book of the Bible memorized? I didn't think so. I sure don't. They were literally professional Jews. They were paid to be Jewish, essentially. They knew the whole thing inside and out, upside down, left and right, upside, downside. I don't know if there's any other way to say it. They knew it. They also served a Jewish king. They served Herod. They were also only 6 miles from Bethlehem. 6 miles. And yet, who out of those parties shows up to see Jesus and worship him? It wasn't the guys that had the closest drive. It was the guys that had the most to lose, the most to invest. Those are the ones that show up. How do I know they didn't show up? Because it's not recorded. Matthew would have recorded it if these Jewish priests went to visit Jesus. But they didn't. They didn't. They missed out on Jesus. I'm going to tell you something. If your response to this is, I'm not going to miss out on Jesus, I'm in church every single Sunday, then there's a good chance you're missing out on him. What did these guys do wrong? With something so many people today do wrong as well. They let religion and religiosity come before the Messiah. They were waiting so long for this guy to come, for this Messiah to come, that he shows up and they miss it. They can't see the forest through the trees. They're so focused on his coming that when he gets there, they miss it. They miss it. On the outside, they looked like they were ready, right? They had the dress of a Pharisee, a Sadducee. They had the devotion. They were in the temple every day doing the religious practices. But on the inside, their hearts were empty. Don't let religion get in the place of finding Jesus. The whole point of everything we do on a Sunday or any time we get to worship is not is only important if it brings us to Jesus. Don't get these priorities mixed up. Okay? If the things that we do don't bring us to Jesus, then they're things we need to quit doing. This is how we've always done it. Have you ever heard that one? That was the excuse of the Pharisees. They'd always come and advised the king and then went home. And that's what they did that day. They could have walked 6 miles. 6 miles is about a 2-hour walk for us, okay? You got 2 hours there. You spend time a little bit seeing the baby. You got another 2 back, throw in grabbing lunch to eat, and if the wife needed you to grab something while you're out and about, okay? So just for easy math, just say 8 hours. You had a whole work day that you could have just went to see if it happened to be the Messiah, and yet you couldn't swing it. Just think how pathetic that is. That's pretty pathetic, isn't it? They wouldn't walk from essentially here to Callinsburg to see if he was the real deal. The other group of guys traveled from here to Missouri because they saw a star. You see, it's not about the head knowledge of Jesus. It's all about the position of our heart. Here's what I want to end with this morning. Are we in a position today that if Jesus was 6 miles away, we would walk to go see him? Let's close in prayer. Lord, we thank you for today. I thank you for your word and your message, and just the timelessness of the words that you have written for us. Lord, I just ask that you would help us to put our hearts in a position where we would not miss you as the Lord of our life, as Messiah. Lord, help us to have the commitment to go and find you, not to just say like those guys did, he's not coming, he's not here. Lord, be with us as we close in song, and help us to worship you through it. In your name we pray. Amen.